Hi, thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Nicole.
And I'm your host, Jacqueline. You're listening to the first season of Perfictionist. Welcome back. Today we're diving into Verity by popular fiction author Colleen Hoover. So let's kick things off with a brief introduction. The suspenseful thriller by Colleen Hoover is a roller coaster of emotions and a whirlwind of suspense with a dash of romance. Kind of a dash of romance.
We'll get there.
Yeah. Loan Ashley, a struggling writer, is hired to complete best-selling author Verity Crawford's series. But while going through Verity's notes, she discovers a hidden autobiography revealing disturbing truths about Verity's past, leading to a moral dilemma as her feelings for Verity's husband Jeremy intensify.
This is our non-spoilers episode where we'll be discussing the themes, writing style, pacing, all that kind of stuff, but we will not be spoiling anything for you. If you've already read Verity and you want to listen to our heavy spoilers discussion, please keep your eyes out. We will be releasing that shortly. Verity is an adult thriller romance, so I found it to be a perfect combination of those two different genres in the sense that it is equal parts thriller and romance, depending on how you define romance.
Yeah, I think it's classified as that, but just given the sort of style of the romance, I want to say, or like the feelings involved, I felt like it wasn't a romance. I felt like maybe it was more like a thriller blended with some maybe erotica.
Yeah, erotica could be, I think that is a much better descriptor word to describe what is actually happening in the story.
Yeah.
No, I agree. Romance makes it sound loving.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess depending on who you are, that's not how I personally took the romance, quote unquote, in this story.
Same.
So, I mean, we're only two people, but sample size says
yes.
Not romance.
Yes.
But there are some scenes that involve things that a romance book would also involve.
True. Yes.
Just done differently.
Yeah.
So this is definitely adult.
Very adult.
Not young adult, not new adult. I mean, depending on your maturity level and kind of where you draw those lines, it is an adult book.
Yes. And it is there's some erotic scenes, very graphic erotic scenes. So for sure, adult.
Mm-hmm. And if you do not enjoy reading erotic scenes, then this might not be the thriller for you.
Mm-hmm. If I had to describe this book in 3 words, I would say it's unpredictable, suspenseful, and seductive.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely perfect description. I think those 3 words sum up what you can expect if you were to read Verity.
Mm-hmm.
In regards to the pacing of Verity, we actually differ quite a bit on this based on what we've kind of talked about off screen. Yeah. I found this book quite slow paced in the beginning. I mean, the very, very beginning, it kind of like hits you a little bit. And then for me, like after this like initial shock of the first scene, it kind of really, really slowed down for me until about chapter 16, which is the last third of the book. And then after that, I found it quite gripping and was very much like, don't talk to me. I need to finish this book.
Yes.
But until then, for me, it was much, much slower.
Oh, that's so interesting. Because right from page 1, I was like gripped by the book and I had to know what was going to happen. So I think like either way, at some point, the book does grab a hold of you, and what you're talking about from chapter 16 on, absolutely. It is like really just blazingly fast paced.
Mm-hmm.
But also, like, this is non-spoilers, but I think I can say this. I hated every single character in this book. I deeply hated them.
I 100% agree. And as I was reading the story, I thought kept popping up in my brain. And I have a Storygraph account for rating books. It's like Goodreads. It's
Okay.
different, same but different. And one of the questions they ask you is, are the characters likable? And it's like, yes, no, or it's complicated. And I just kept thinking, like, no. Every couple like chapters, I'd just be like, there's no likable characters.
No.
But I don't think that's a bad thing. I think
No.
it works for this book.
It does. It works for this book. It's interesting because I enjoyed the book as something that was really amusing to read. I might read it one more time now that we've read through it and there's like a really shocking ending. Just after having read it, I've got some theories, which we'll discuss in the heavy spoilers episode, that I'd like to almost reread and see, like, do my theories fit? There's actually, I looked this up online, there's actually no answers for these theories. But
that doesn't surprise me. I feel like it was intentionally, it ended in such a way that it allows you to draw your own conclusions.
Exactly. Yeah.
There are quite a few themes in every book you read. Obviously, there's more than one theme. And one of the themes in Verity is the difference between truth and deception. I mean, I guess that's kind of like, in the end, the biggest theme in a way, because it's you're left with wondering what is true and what isn't.
Yes, exactly. Very interestingly, Verity literally means truth.
I did not know that. And
yeah,
that's usually the things I like to look up is like the meaning behind things. And I didn't think to look up what Verity meant. It's a very unique name.
It is.
So you would think someone would be drawn to look up what the meaning is. And I'm glad you did, because that, I think, is saying things.
I think so too.
I think it's meant to make you question.
Yeah.
Another theme that is kind of threaded throughout and kind of speaks to maybe some of the more erotic scenes that we mentioned earlier is this idea of love versus obsession, and just how far people are willing to go for the people who they love, quote, all that. And this book really kind of explores that idea of love versus, are you taking it maybe too far?
Right? Yeah. Like, absolutely. There's definitely some examples of love in the book in a different way, not even involving the main character, but I don't know. I do feel like the thread of obsession is a pretty strong theme throughout this book, in referring to many different relationships in this book.
Yeah. I completely agree.
Some other kind of themes we might come across, morality and ethics, I think, is a big one in this, or the lack of. I think that it challenges the main character, and by extension the readers, to grapple with some very difficult decisions and ultimately the consequences of the character's actions. This story for sure keeps the reader, at least it did for me. The reader I keep referring to as myself. Guessing about the character's motivations right up until the end. Like, right up until the end.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. You are second guessing every single person in this story. Like, even like the side characters, I'm like, you seem fishy.
Right?
Like, no one's like free of criticism in this book. And yeah, it definitely leaves you wondering, like, and it gets gray in some areas. And depending on who you believe, maybe you'll think certain things make sense or are worth it, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's definitely interesting.
Yeah, it is.
There's lots of dark psychological elements to the story. It is, I think, like more like a psychological thriller. It really gets in your mind, in the sense that it like messes with you, what's real, what's not, as we've mentioned. And yeah, it's very dark. It gets a little twisty.
Yeah. Very twisty. It's a bit whiplashy, this book.
Yeah, and you have to question at times, like, who, like, is the narrator reliable? Are the other characters reliable? Like, whose perspective should we be, trusting or paying attention to?
Exactly. I feel like those questions only get stronger as the story goes on.
No, definitely. And then on top of all that, a lot of the characters in this story have experienced significant trauma.
Hmm.
And you have to kind of remind yourself that when someone experiences trauma, their perception could be slightly different than other people's, and how they
Yes,
see the world could be altered from that.
exactly. I think that was done pretty well. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it was mentioned pretty intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
So there are some identifiable tropes in this story, but I find, at least personally, I found that Colleen Hoover navigated them in a way that kind of subverts your expectations. What did you think?
I I'm not entirely sure. I don't know if I've read enough of this genre to kind of have expectations at this point. I feel like whenever I go into a mystery or thriller, I have no expectations.
Right.
My expectation is to be like for something unexpected to happen. So therefore nothing ever unexpected happens because I'm always expecting it to not be not
Sure.
you know what
That
I'm
makes
saying.
sense. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm sure
So,
she did, but
mhm.
yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay. So the three tropes I kind of identified in this book were dark past, amnesia, and forbidden love.
Mhm.
I don't know that I've seen them done in this way. And as we've mentioned a few times, the twists and turns keep you guessing. So while there are these tropes, there may be some like twisty aspects
Mhm.
that you might not expect.
Yeah, maybe not done in the way you've seen previously or read about previously.
Yeah. So regarding the plot structure, there was almost like a jump back in time aspect. I was actually in my notes here. I have we can't talk about like the manuscript that Lowen found, but we can because it's in the official book synopsis. So I feel like it's not really spoiling anything.
Mhm.
So when Lowen does come across this and she's reading those shocking admissions, as it refers to in the synopsis, that because you get so immersed, it's not just like little blurbs here and there. Quite often you're like reading it for a few pages, so you get
Mhm.
almost like a sucked back in time kind of feel, and you're looking
Mhm.
at it from Verity's perspective rather than Lowen's, at least while she's reading the manuscript. So I think um it gives that kind of feeling of jumping back and forth in time. But yeah, what did you think?
I actually really enjoyed it. I liked that instead of us only hearing about the manuscript from Lowen's point of view, which we do hear her point of view on it and her thoughts on it, but we actually just get to read chapters of the manuscript itself, like full chapters.
Yeah.
So there's a different font title for when you're reading the manuscript versus when you're reading Verity, the
Hmm.
story you're actually reading.
Hmm.
And I really enjoyed being shown that.
Yeah, me too. So I was really interested in finding out like what kind of emotional impact this story had on you. For myself, I was basically in a constant state of disbelief and in a constant state of disgusted fascination. I read the book in one sitting, like I just couldn't put it down. And I hear that's actually very common with this book.
Mhm. I can see why. I read it in two sittings, but mostly because I had to go to work. So I couldn't sit down and read it all in one day. So I started it one day and then like had to like adult and then I finished it the next day. And it could easily be read in one sitting for sure. And it is like you want to know what happens. Like even
Hmm.
though I said it was slower paced for me at the beginning, I still wanted to know what happened. And it's an easy book to read.
Hmm.
It's not, you don't get like hung up on things. Like it's easy to stay focused on the book itself. I didn't find myself like looking around the room staring at random things. Like I was engaged with the book the entire time, even though I wasn't like like the last third of the book, I like was getting like anxious wanting to know what happened. Where in the first 2/3, I was just like, I want to know what happens. But it wasn't bringing that like level of anxiety that you expect when you're reading a thriller until the last like 100 pages or so.
Yeah, I do feel like that first part of the book was just really setting it up for that last part to be just very tense.
Yeah, you needed the first part for the last part to make sense. Like it all flows exactly as it should. But yeah, it just got really good at the end.
Yeah.
Or like the intensity of it picked up at the end.
It did, for sure.
I think that this book is a awesome book for anyone who likes thrillers and who likes thrillers that have more of a like spicy, but maybe not like your typical spicy. I don't know what kind of erotic books you're reading, so maybe this is exactly the kind of book that you typically read. For myself, it was different than the books that I have read in the past that are more romantic in nature. However, if that is your cup of tea, something, I guess maybe like a darker romance, you could call it, or a more twisty romance.
Yeah.
And then plus the combination of thriller, if that's your jam, then I think you'll really, really enjoy Verity.
I would highly recommend this book to anyone who enjoys a good psychological thriller that just makes those question marks pop up in your mind. What is going on? If thrillers, depravity, and graphic, physical, intimate moments are not your thing, I would definitely suggest skipping this book.
Yes, it is for a certain audience, but I think the audience it's for, they're going to really enjoy it.
We like to kind of close these little non-review episodes out with either similar or comparable books or recommendations we may have if you enjoyed this book. This one's a little bit tricky because this is a very different thriller, and I had to think about it for quite a while before I came up with like a comparative title. The closest thing I could come up with was a book called The Couple Next Door. So that one I think was a bestseller. It did really well, but it's still nothing like Verity, other than there's definitely like the mystery element. It's tense and it's not as fast paced necessarily at the beginning, but it's disturbing. So if you enjoyed Verity, maybe you'll enjoy The Couple Next Door, or vice versa.
Oh, thank you for that recommendation. I'm going to have to look into that now. Thank you very much for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we hope to see you next time.
Happy reading, and bye-bye for now.